Hi, how are you? This is Mike Haber, me, and I'm sitting next to Ed Martinez. And together we are proud to have Miami's community newspapers allow us a forum to talk to y'all in a show that we have entitled At Your Service. And the reason that it's called At Your Service is because we hope to be able to help you, the folks of Miami-Dade County or wherever you happen to may be, noting that we're only Florida licensed lawyers, but to help you to field your questions that you may have, any concerns that you may have, maybe even thoughts and things that you want to discuss relative to current events or news articles, primarily as they surround the criminal justice system. You're going to notice that we're not in suits and ties. We are attorneys, we are licensed, and if we go to court for you, we'll certainly be in suits and ties. But here, we're just average guys. We're two citizens of Miami-Dade County. We're fathers, we're sons, we're friends, and we live our lives just like every one of you every day, which means that we're subject to the same frailties that everybody else is subject to. And those include the possibilities of run-ins with law enforcement. They include the possibilities of being arrested rightly or wrongfully. They include the possibilities of being arrested mistakenly. They include confrontations with what I like to call cops, courts, and constitutions. And when that happens, it's good to have information. And there's a lot of stuff that we can tell you generically and proactively that'll give you information to help you in those situations should you have them. But more importantly, we can help come in after the fact and try and clean up a mess that was created before we got involved, and hopefully will be spotless and shiny after we're done polishing it. With that, let me introduce my friend, Ed Martinez. Ed?
Michael, thank you for having me here. You know, it's funny you say that because not only can we help you fix the problems after, hopefully help you fix it after it happens. Many times, unfortunately, we try to talk to clients or previous clients or friends that have questions, right? And we tell them what to do, and they don't listen to us anyway. And they do it, and they still need us to help clean up the mess and figure it out. That's why I love that meme with what's his name that did The Hangover, where he's on the desert on the phone, and it says, when you don't take your lawyer's advice, but you call them to fix it anyway. That happens a lot. But hopefully, this show is to get you guys to, help you out. We're going to be talking many times in generic terms, but we are fielding specific questions about, if you have any specific questions, and we know anonymity is a very big deal. So we've created a fan page called At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. I think we have a link right now up on the, or something up there right on the side of the screen you can look at.
You can also access it from either of our Facebook pages. We're both admins on that page. So I've linked it on Michael Adam Haber on Facebook or Miami.Criminal Lawyer on Facebook.
And Edward A. Martinez also on Facebook.
So through either of those, you can get to the platform of the At Your Service with Haber and Martinez. And as Ed said, that's kind of important because our hope and our goal is that people are going to reach out to us and say, hey, I have this question, I have this concern, but obviously most people don't want their name to get out there. In fact, it's funny, we were talking about when we were coming up with the concept of how to do this show, I had said to Ed that way back in the day, in the mid 60s and through the 70s, my father, who was a clinical psychologist, had a show called At Your Service. And it was on WKAT radio on Miami Beach. And the idea was that folks would call in and talk about their personal issues with a psychologist who could help them. But of course, back in that time, technology was very different than it was today. And so anonymity was not an issue. Unless somebody recognized your voice, nobody knew who you were over the radio. So, it's a little different to have somebody, although you're free to do it, we're certainly not going to tell you not to, but you need to understand that there's no attorney-client confidentiality on this forum because it's a public discussion. It's streaming live on Facebook. So we will do everything and say everything that we can to help you, but you have to understand that if you want your anonymity, then you're going to have to be the one to, make that happen by sending us either private messages or direct messages. And by the way, my phone number and email and contact information are certainly not matters of public national security. So feel free to use them as well. I don't want to sit here with my cell phone all hour, looking at it and doing that, but we will to the extent that we need to. Ed and I can certainly ping pong back and forth.
Correct. You can message me personally through the At Your Service page, through Michael's pages. You can also find our phone numbers, but for the sake of the show, I think it'd be more it'd be streamlined better if you just send it through Messenger, and it'll come to us personally, so no one will ever see that. And then we can either address it. Sometimes we can address it right here, but if we don't get to address it right now today on the show, we'll make a point of addressing it next Monday, because we're going to be here every Monday, starting at 2.
Hopefully at 2.
Today we were a little bit behind schedule because there's some technical difficulties that were out of our control. But we're going to be here at 2:00 every Monday, answering your questions, having a little bit of fun as well.
We promise that we'll get Ed's makeup person here earlier next week so that we don't have to wait on that. No,
yeah, it took about an hour. But, listen, it takes a long time to make an ugly face look halfway decent.
It's all right. You're still doing better than me, pal.
So let's get started. What do you want to talk about first?
Actually, before we do that, I want to dovetail and just follow up on what you just said. In just letting people know that we were going to do this, I got a couple of questions earlier. And so, for example, somebody asked me a question about whether or not they could smoke marijuana while they're on probation. And so, we'll and Ed and I will talk about that today, and we'll answer that question for that person. But dovetailing off what Ed said, we could do a whole show, but probably will do a whole show just on the issue of medical and marijuana laws here in the state of Florida, because whether or not you could use marijuana while on probation is just one component to a very large, area of law. You've got, forget probation, you've got possession, you've got possession with intent, you've got sale, you've got enhancements for being in certain areas, you've got conflicts between state and federal law, you've got
That's a good question. There's questions have come up to me. I'm sure you too. Can I have a concealed firearms and a medical marijuana license? And we can answer questions like that.
Absolutely. Well. And medical marijuana and concealed weapons are really actually state questions, but then you dovetail over, can I buy a firearm if I'm a medical marijuana? Because now you've got state and federal.
Right.
And so it's my point being, you may ask a question that's much more complicated or involved, and we could do an entire show and hope to be able to do an entire show on that, because I think it's a pretty popular
And let's
subject.
be clear, there are no stupid questions. Sometimes there are stupid answers, but we're going to promise not to make sure we have no stupid answers. So there are no stupid questions. Trust me, the law is complicated, right, Michael? You could put 5 lawyers in a room. We were talking about this earlier. You could put 5 lawyers in a room, ask one question, and you probably get 5 different answers. Doesn't mean any of the other answers are wrong and one guy is right, but the law is complicated and it's always changing.
And that's also, in large part true because, again, lawyers are people. And so every individual attorney looks at things not only from their experience or their training, but from their own prism as a person. So it's not to say, some lawyers are just dead wrong. Let's call a spade, right? There are just Absolutely. Like anything else. There's some bad plumbers out there. There's some bad cops out there, and there are plenty of bad lawyers to be found in Dade County. But there's also plenty of really good lawyers and good ethical attorneys.
So let's get started. Let's start talking about this, because I know people tuned in. They want to hear our advice, our suggestions, our ideas, our opinions. Some of the stuff we talk about is going to be factual. Some of the things we talk about are going to be opinions. As a matter of fact, Michael and I might disagree in terms of how we would handle a specific case, and neither of us will be wrong. We team up well because we actually do come usually from a different perspective. But let's get started. What do you want to talk about first today?
Well, I think we can talk about that too. We could talk a little bit more about that, right? That we do look at things differently because we have different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, I've been a criminal defense attorney since the day that I got licensed. The Florida bar said, Haber, you can practice law. And I went out and hung my shingle.
And that's scary. I got an enormous amount of respect for anybody who does that, because I can tell you, when you graduate law school, it's like anything else. All you've got is a degree. You have no clue what you are doing.
You're basically a Facebook lawyer with a real law degree.
With an actual degree.
Yeah.
But I went to the state attorney's office.
And so that's kind of the point, right? So a lot of times, for example, here's a great way to start off that conversation is Ed. Actually, I met Ed back in the 90s when he was working for the state of early 2000s, when he was working for the state attorney's office, and he was in the narcotics division, and I had various narcotics cases. And so his experience as a narcotics prosecutor gives him a different background and different perspective than my experience as strictly a defense attorney. So oftentimes I will call Ed and say, hey, what do you think about this scenario? And because of his experience, he's got a different take, or maybe one that I didn't think of, or maybe something that says,
because I have an insight into how a prosecutor thinks. I know what is the buzz buttons and what isn't. A lot of times, unless you were in the office, like anything else in life, unless you were actually working in that office, there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths. And sometimes if a criminal defense attorney had one or two bad experiences with a state attorney, that's it. They get gun shy. They don't trust state attorneys. They're like, I'm not going to tell them what I've got. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to do this. But I have a different perspective because I knew a lot of people there. And I'll say, listen, sometimes it's just better to just give them a call and just talk to the prosecutor and tell them, can I have a discussion with you before we go and file motions and do all these other things? And the prosecutors will appreciate it, because a lot of times the prosecutors are stuck with what the cops tell them and they don't really know. And it's up to the defense attorney to educate the state attorney and say, got a problem with this case. So sometimes a quick phone call is actually the easier and better route to go. So we got, a lot we can bring.
You always get a little bit. I think in my experience, I find you usually get further with sugar than you do with spice. But sometimes you just got to bring the spice. I mean, it's just.
Well, you know what I tell my clients? I always tell my clients, and this is true in every aspect of the law, there's always time to fight. And a lot of clients think they love what they see on TV. They see these TV shows and they think, oh, my lawyer's awesome. From day one, he was screaming and yelling at everybody. That's not the best route, because all you do is piss people off and they're ready to fight too.
Well, let's launch off from that point and let's talk about the potential clients out there that start with the premise that that they're going to have that attitude with the law enforcement officer that pulls them over.
Okay.
And so when the officer walks up to the window and says, sir, can I have your driver's license and registration? And that individual looks at the officer and says, no. Or who do you think you are?
Or what for?
Or why am right, and getting in that guy's grill. And so, here's a situation where I could tell you, I think Ed would agree with me, you may not have done anything wrong. Maybe the cop was mistaken. Maybe there's a justification or an explanation, but starting off aggressive and posturing with a law enforcement officer is going to more likely than not set the tone for how that thing's going to go. But even worse, it's going to come out later in court, and especially if the officer is wearing body cam and, you're being mouthy, a judge or a jury or a prosecutor is going to look at that and they may not accept your, perhaps you're a sovereign citizen.
Yeah, here's, I think, the biggest misconception, because people see a lot of videos, especially now, there's a lot of these YouTube videos or videos that are going viral. And I see it all the time when they say, the caption will say, so-and-so schools cop on the law. Let me explain something to you. You're not going to win on the side of the road. 95% of the time, you're going to lose. It's their world. It's their area. You're not going to win that fight. What's best for you to do is to be nice, be humble, be polite, get your ticket so you don't end up getting arrested. Then you go see somebody. We can handle the ticket. If you're going to get arrested, be polite, be nice. Don't talk, which we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't say a thing, but be polite to the officer, because we can handle that. For example, when I first left the state, I used to do a lot of traffic tickets. Not a lot, but I did a few.
You got a lot of traffic tickets? You did a lot of traffic tickets?
I shall neither confirm nor deny if
you committed a lot of traffic offenses and racked up a lot of tickets?
I am not going to confirm or deny if both of those are accurate.
How many point suspensions did you have?
Actually, none, because I'm a good lawyer. But there's a laundry list of my traffic printout of dismissed. But let me tell you one of the things I do, and I don't mind sharing this because they appreciate this. Since I don't do a lot of traffic tickets, right? When the guys who have the traffic clinics, they do a lot of traffic tickets. So officers are less inclined to do what I'm about to tell you that they do for me, right? They know me. A lot of them know me because of the reputation I had at the state. So they know who I am. And they see me walk in on a traffic ticket and they're like, what is he doing here?
He must have gotten a ticket.
Right. So the first thing I do is find out who the arresting officer is. And the very first thing I ask him is, I tell him who I am, who I represent. I say, can I ask you a question before I ask you about the case? Were they polite? Because if they were polite, they usually are willing to work with me. And many times they'll say, I'll ask them to dismiss it. And they'll say, yeah, what's his traffic record like? Okay, fine. But let me give you a real world example on an officer who became a friend of mine. He's a field training officer. I show up, and this was my paralegal. Okay. And I specifically asked her, when you got stopped, were you polite? And she said, yeah, of course I was polite. I said, okay, it was a stop. It was a stop sign, Michael. She ran a stop sign. That's it. This was just running of a stop sign. So I get there and I say to the officer, listen, I understand this, that, and the other. And I understand that she was polite, right? And he says, excuse me? And he turns his copy of his citation over, and it looked like he had written a novel of her quotes. And I'm paraphrasing, but I shall quote. What did you stop me for? Don't you got better things to do? Go out and arrest people that are criminals. I didn't run the stop sign. This is why you guys get shot.
She left out. She left the only one that she left out is the other one that's the big taboo no, and that's the name drop, right?
Well, she didn't have any names to drop.
I know Sergeant whoever, and or I know the chief, or I know the mayor, and we're gonna have your bat.
Don't do that. So, long story short, the guy looks at me and he says that, and I started laughing. I said, dude, I'm so sorry. I apologize. She told me she was polite. There's nothing I can do at that point because it's his word against hers that she ran the stop sign. And then, the killer was this. She says, I know I didn't run the stop sign because I come here every day for the last 3 years. That doesn't mean you're not going to run it. On the contrary, every cop knows that if you do this on a regular basis, you tend to do a rolling stop because you're very familiar with the area. So at the end of the day, I had to get up and tell the judge, I was very nice to the officer. I was laughing with him. I was helping him, trying to calm him down because he wanted her to go. He was trying to figure out a way to put her in jail. So I started laughing, and I knew the judge, and I started laughing because she knew if I was there, I was probably going to argue something. I said, Judge, I got nothing to argue. I'm hoping that this officer I can throw myself at his mercy and he'll be polite. And he started laughing, and he eventually said, all right, how about just a withhold court cost? So she ended up getting no points, but he wanted to throw the book at her. That's the worst thing you can do. You just say, I'm sorry, officer. Thank you. And that's it.
You might not even have to throw the I'm sorry in there, but the point is to be respectful, to just, keep your mouth shut. The less you say, the better.
The better.
So I use on my marketing, I use a catchphrase. It's #UpX2. #UpX2. And what it means is up times 2. Shut up and lawyer up. When things get bad, shut up and lawyer up.
Right.
There's a very solid reason why the Miranda warnings say anything you say can and will be used against you. And in today's day and age, it's amazing to me that they don't all have it. But in today's day and age, many, if not most, police officers and police vehicles even are equipped with digital and audio and video recording equipment. So whether it's a body cam or whether they have surreptitious recording inside police vehicles, every now and then they'll take 2 people that they arrest at the same time and intentionally throw them in the same police car because they know they're going to record these 2 idiots talking about, don't tell them this and don't say that, don't tell them where the drugs are. And, and they just sit there and laugh. It's almost laughable to them because like shooting fish in a barrel, because people are really that thoughtless.
And let me explain something on sometimes, because a lot of my friends are law enforcement, but they know there's bad cops. In every profession, there's bad ones. I'm going to tell you a real world example on why you should keep your mouth shut. I had a client of mine who was in his mid to late 20s, and he had a girlfriend. He had just met her. He knew that her previous boyfriend was also about 20 something, almost 30 years old. Dad finds out that this girl is seeing this kid. So the cops come in and want to talk to him, and they say, will you come down to the station and talk to us about it? Now, this is what the arrest affidavit read. The arrest affidavit read that when they asked him if he knew how old she was, or that something like that, if she was 15, did he know she was 15? And they wrote an affirmative statement. She's 15. That's what he said. So when I asked him, he started laughing. He goes, what are they talking about? When they told me she was 15, I said, she's 15?
So they basically took that scene from My Cousin Vinny, where the kid, Ralph Macchio, they say to him, you shot the clerk. And he goes, I shot the clerk?
Exactly. That's exactly what they did. They left off the question mark.
Right. Well, but today.
And now who's going to say he did it? Because they didn't record it. So now it's his word against theirs. If he just kept his mouth, what he really should have done is when the cops say, we wanted you to talk to us, go get a lawyer.
Up X2.
And go with your lawyer. I'll give you another example. I had a client who actually was accused of shooting and killing someone. And tried to kill someone else. The one that he tried to kill, allegedly, was sitting in the hospital in a coma. So they picked him up and they wanted to talk to him, but he was smart enough to call me. And as soon as I showed up, the officer was a homicide detective who knew my reputation. I didn't know him personally, but he knew my reputation. He started laughing. He goes, "Is there any chance that your client's going to talk to us?" I go, "Well, it's his choice, but you know what my recommendation is going to be." He started laughing. He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You don't have anything on him, do you?" He goes, "Yeah, I got nothing. If he doesn't confess, we got nothing." So it's best sometimes you just keep your mouth shut.
And there are times also where you talk about good cops, bad cops, and of course, obviously, this is the news of the day, right? So I happen to agree with you, and I believe that most police officers want quote unquote bad police officers off the police force.
They do.
Because all they do is make their lives miserable.
Correct.
And most of these guys, look, like I said, we're just a couple of guys. We may have law degrees, but we're just guys. We're citizens. We're fathers. We're brothers. We're
I'm the son
sons.
I'm the son of an electrician, brother.
So
grew up in almost poverty.
Whatever the case, we're just average people. But the same thing can be said for everyone, including police officers. These are fathers and daughters and sons and mothers, and they're people who really all they want to do is go home to their family at the end of their shift.
That is correct.
That's their goal. Most of them, yeah, of course, there's going to be a bad seed out there that's looking to, today I'm going to screw somebody, but mostly they don't want to screw people.
And I got to tell you, honestly, even the guys that have that attitude, they're not saying, okay, I'm going to stop this guy, I'm going to screw him. They're just looking for the guy that gives them the excuse. That's what they're looking for.
Which is exactly what we've been talking
about.
Right.
So you bump into that guy on a traffic ticket, and the next thing you know, you're getting redirected to the ground and you're getting arrested for
exactly
on a law enforcement officer because he was looking for somebody to give him the excuse.
And you gave him the excuse
gave it to him
by going out there on that limb instead of just taking your ticket and going on your way. But let me ask you this. Let's talk about this one. What happens when that traffic stop, and let's say that it's something innocuous. It could be even something that you're not even aware of doing wrong. Like let's say one of your taillights is out.
Correct.
Or let's say you just happen to creep towards that white line on either side of your vehicle. Or let's say that a tire blows out. I mean, anything could happen.
For instance, you might be speeding. Not that I will deny or confirm that I have been stopped for that.
It could be
maybe you're speeding a little bit.
Whatever the reason. I mean, again, you could be speeding intentionally. You could be weaving in and out of traffic, whatever the reason. But let's just say it's even an innocuous reason, okay? You get pulled over and the police officer asks you for your information. And during the dialogue, the next words out of the officer's mouth are, "Have you been drinking tonight?" Now, all of a sudden, your routine traffic stop has become a criminal investigation. You are now involved in a full-blown criminal investigation for more than likely driving under the influence, whether it's alcohol or controlled substances or a combination of both. And how do you deal with that officer who would not have asked you that question, but for the fact something alerted the officer to ask that question?
Mm-hmm.
They don't ask everybody that gets pulled over for a reason or that they see on the roadside, maybe your car broke down or whatever.
Right.
They don't ask everybody, "Have you been drinking?" They ask people, "Have you been drinking?" if they have some sensory reason, be it your driving pattern, like maybe you were driving recklessly or you were weaving or you were unable to maintain a lane.
Or the light turned green and you were still sitting there for 3 minutes.
Cycled through a light, or you didn't have your headlights on at night, or but it could be that none of those things happen. Let's say it's just your taillight and you get pulled over and the officer walks up to the window. Well, why would they do that? Perhaps they smell alcohol. Perhaps you have an open container in the vehicle. Perhaps there's a pill sitting on your console, or
you're slurring your speech,
or some paraphernalia, or your eyes are bloodshot and watery, or your speech is slurred, or any of a number of telltale reasons that an officer might, what I would call, upgrade a routine traffic stop to a now criminal investigation. And what is it that they're doing at that point? They're now looking to see whether or not there's reasonable suspicion in order for them to conduct this investigation and get you out of your car and have you take roadside sobriety tests if you're willing to do them, and then possibly arrest you or take you to the police station and offer you the opportunity to either further incriminate yourself by blowing into a machine with a positive number on there, or by refusing, in which case they get a presumption of impairment. But we'll do a whole show on DUI. Right. But the point of this is your behavior, your choice, your decision, right? So Ed and I go out, we have dinner, and I have a beer or a glass of wine, and I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with me. I had a full dinner. I had one drink. We were together for 2 hours. I am in no way, shape, or form impaired, but you could smell that alcohol.
Maybe.
Right? Maybe you could smell it. And so I get pulled over because my taillight's broken, and the officer smells it and says to me, "Have you been drinking tonight?" And now what do I say? There's the $64,000 question. If I tell him the truth, "Yes, officer, I had one beer." Well, now I just admitted to drinking. And who's to say that he's going to accept my self-serving exculpatory statement, even if it happens to be true, that I only had one beer?
And hold on, one beer could get you to the 0.08. It all depends on the person. It all depends on how much you had to eat. It all depends on when you had it. It could get you to a 0.08,
well,
which is the legal limit.
If we're going to talk about DUI, you don't even have to get to the legal limit of 0.08 because, as you know, under the law here in the state of Florida, and as is the case in most states, if not all states, it's over 0.08 creates what's called a rebuttable presumption of impairment, meaning if you're 0.08 or above, they can arrest you for sure, and they've got that presumption, which you can then fight in court. But it doesn't matter. You could blow under.
Yeah, I think it's 0.06 to 0.08.
You could blow under. You could blow 0.000 and still get arrested.
That's true.
Because the alternative method of prosecution for DUI is called impairment. So they don't have to prove what your content was. They just have to prove that you were unable to have your normal faculties were impaired to a point that you could not operate a motor vehicle.
And you're free.
Now
you have the option. You're free to tell the officer how much you've had to drink. You're free to do roadsides. You're free to do the breathalyzer. You're free to allow them to do the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, which is when they get the little pen or the little light and they move it in front of your eyes. You are free to do that. That's your option and your opinion, and you can do what you like. If you're asking me my opinion, me personally, I wouldn't say anything. No matter what. I don't care if I had one beer. I am not talking. I'm not doing roadsides. I'm not doing the breath. This is me personally, not as a lawyer now. Me personally. I wouldn't do it because as a former state attorney, I can tell you that if the state has no evidence, it's almost impossible for them to prove it. The officer is going to say, "I smelled alcohol." And then the next thing they're going to say is, "I got nothing else except for, oh, come on, guys. I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night." If they refused everything, it's because they were impaired. But guess what? The standard, at least when I've done this in my closing argument and in my jury selection, I always tell the jury, remember, the standard is not I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. The standard is, can they prove it beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt? And if they don't have any evidence, how are you going to prove it to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt? You can't. So, but again, this is a personal choice. You have to decide what you want to do.
Well, I like to use on my Facebook page, I post what I call a Haber PA, hashtag Haber PA, PSA of the day. And I like to talk about things like this.
I love those, by the way. You crack me up with those things.
I appreciate it.
If you guys have not seen it, you got to go see it because some of them are funnier than others, but some of them are really funny.
I try to give a little proactive advice on those. And we talk about these things, very frequently. So there's a lot to drag out on this. And like I said, we could easily do a show. We could do a whole series of shows. We could do one show just on FSTs. We could do one show just on roadsides. We could do, et cetera. But I agree with you in spirit. Look, less is more. When you deprive the government of physical evidence, it's harder for them to prove their case. It's very difficult for you to refute when a prosecutor gets into evidence a breath card that shows that you blew 3 times the legal limit. It's very difficult to refute that physical scientific evidence that the state is going to tout as the next coming.
Right.
It's hard to get around. It's much easier when they don't have that breath card. But then again, there are other things that you can't control. So let's say, for instance, the police officer is following you on I-95 or on the Palmetto Expressway or on the Dolphin Expressway or whatever. And over a period of 30 seconds, you're just all over the roadway,
Right.
That is physical evidence that you can't refute. Now, you may say, I dropped my phone. I
was texting.
Cigarette on my, you don't want to admit to texting while driving. It's better than a DUI.
It's better than a DUI.
But
I was changing the radio station.
Again, there may be plausible explanations, but that's there. And what you won't be able to refute is the officer's testimony. I mean, you may be able to dispute it, but you can't refute it.
Right.
So the officer is going to say what he or she is going to say. And if there is body cam, then that body cam is going to show it too.
Right.
So, again, bad statements. I had a DUI once where I had a female client at about 4:00 in the morning wearing virtually nothing because she was a dancer, an exotic dancer who had just gotten off work. And when the officer asked her for her ID, this is on body cam. I mean, you read this, let me tell you, you read some of these police reports and you just can't believe them. You just say to yourself, it's not possible. And then body cam came out.
Exactly.
Okay. So this woman, he says, can I have your driver's license, registration, proof of insurance? She reaches into her nothing top and pulls out a wad of cash and literally tenders it to the officer. And he says, ma'am, I asked you for your driver's license. And she says, oh, this won't work. And he says, no, ma'am, I need your driver's license. And she says, well, what will work?
No, she did not.
Yeah, she did. And she got charged with DUI and she got charged with trying to bribe a police officer. So, again, these are things that are irrefutable. You may have no breath, you may have no FSTs, you may have no urine, you may have no blood. But if you're handing the police officer money and asking him, is this going to suffice? And, can we go our own way? That's going to be a problem.
How about this? How about the dash cam on a DUI? I had one before this happened. Dash cam on a DUI, she's doing pretty good. She's not perfect, but it could be explained. And she was telling me she had a bad hip and all these things. Of course, she told me she hadn't been drinking, even though they found a bottle of wine, empty bottle of wine in the backseat of her car. If you're not drinking, probably a good idea to get those things out of your car.
And by the way, while you're saying that, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to because the boat, when BUI is the same thing as a DUI, it's just on the water on a vessel. And most people don't drive around in their car with empties or open containers, although some do. But boats, most people drive around with empties on their boats, and those things are damning. It's evidence.
Right.
There's no way around it. When that FWC officer's body cam and he's walking around your boat and there's 47 empty beer bottles on your boat and a half drank bottle of rum, that's coming in. It's called circumstantial evidence.
Explain to them what FWC is, because I've had clients tell me he's not even a real cop. Yeah, they are.
They're state. Not only are they real cops, they're state police. And I'll tell you an interesting personal story.
What is it? Wildlife?
Florida
Wildlife.
I think it's actually FWCC or FFL.
But it's basically Florida Wildlife.
Whatever it is, Florida Wildlife Commission. So these guys, you find them on the water a lot, but they always drive these nice pickup trucks, and sometimes they're towing their boats. Anyhow, I get pulled over by an FWC officer in my car on the road. And the guy, I was speeding. There's no question. I'm not denying I was speeding. But this guy had a chip on his shoulder. And maybe it was because I got the logo on my thing and he's like, oh, look at this lawyer. I'm going to, give him a hard time.
Or maybe he just knew you and then that's why he didn't like you.
I don't think he knew me. I certainly didn't know him.
If he did, he wouldn't.
But here's a great example of not following my own advice, doing as I say and not as I do, right? And so the guy pulls me over and he says, can I see your driver's license and registration? I go, for what? And he's like, because you were speeding. I said, yeah. So, were you going to call a police officer? And obviously that set the tone for how that went, and the ticket that I wound up getting, because
nice job,
FWC is state law enforcement. I know that now. Okay. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for these guys and their authority on land as well as water, anywhere in the boundaries of the state of Florida. Now you won't find too many regular law enforcement guys on the water like FWC normally.
But City of Miami has
But virtually every municipality here in South Florida has its own
City
marine
of Miami
unit.
has a big unit.
Well, City of Miami has
the river, because the Miami
City
River.
of Miami has a huge unit, but Metro-Dade has a huge unit. And then Miami Beach has a unit.
Right.
Indian Creek Island has its own unit. They've got like 13 houses and they've got their own police marine unit. You've got Bal Harbor has their own unit. Bay Harbor, you've got Sunny Isles Beach, you've got Aventura, you've got North Miami Beach. All of these municipalities, Hallandale, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, you can run all the way up, BSO. There's a lot of marine law enforcement.
So let me get back to my story. So she's doing pretty good. And she's telling me, I really wasn't drinking. I think I had a little bit of the one. I don't even remember exactly what she said. So I'm thinking, it's great. They're going to go down. Wait till I get the Discovery. I get the dash cam. I'm looking at it. She's not doing too bad. Looks like maybe she's having trouble because of her hip. The next thing you know, the cop comes up and says, ma'am, can you step over to my car and put your hands on the hood of the car? So she's staring right into the dash cam like I am right here, like this. And the cop gets her arm and he says, ma'am, at this point, I'm arresting you for DUI. And she goes right into the camera and you can hear it on his body worn. She says, yeah, I figured you got me. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. And then later she says to me, well, what I meant was, I said, it doesn't matter what you meant. You said you got me. You got me. Like, what am I going to do with this? How am I going to explain to the jury that you meant you're a liar and whatever she was coming up with? Keep your mouth shut. Everything today is recorded.
So I had an opposite example. I have an opposite example of that. And again, it's one of these don't do this. This guy just happened to, cards fell in his favor. He gets arrested for DUI and the officer, this is in Broward County, and they take him in Broward. A lot of times what they do, sometimes they'll have you do roadsides, but then they'll have you do them again at the station. And this is back, going back about 20 years. This is long before dash cam or body cam. So they did it at the station at that point because that was the only way they could record it. And they do it on a wall. You see the perp.
Yeah.
When they do the IDs, you've seen one of those on TV or in a movie where they got 5 guys standing next to each other and you got the lines on the wall, 6 feet, 5 feet, so that you can see their height. But they're these horizontal lines. So this guy's on one of those walls. It's just him. And the officer's recording him. So you can only see my guy. The camera's on him. And the officer's instructing him on roadsides. Now, they've already been through all this. My guy has said, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm invoking my right to a lawyer. And by the way, you're not entitled to a lawyer until after you have been arrested. Correct. And DUI investigations are investigations. They're not arrests. You're not under arrest.
So that's another thing. Please do not text me in the middle of a DUI investigation and say, the cop won't let me call you. I know he won't. He's not going to.
Yeah, but maybe you
unless he knows me personally.
Maybe you know the cop and you can text the cop.
That's what I was gonna say. Unless he knows me, if you say Ed Martinez is my lawyer, if he knows me, maybe. But I gotta tell you, most of them are still gonna say, "Great, I know him. Hire him if you like, but you're not calling him right now."
Exactly. So this guy keeps saying, "No, I want my lawyer. I want my lawyers." So they get him back to the station, and he's refusing everything again. And the officer's frustrated, because my guy keeps saying, I want a lawyer. And so you can hear the officer saying to him, I've already told you 20 times, you're not entitled to a lawyer right now, blah, 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 blah. And so my guy, he is cool as a cucumber, okay? This is a guy who's standing on this wall and he is not moving an inch. He's not swaying. Now, he's not swaying because the lines are behind him.
Right.
So if he moved even a millimeter, you'd see it. And this is about a 15-minute video. And during the course of this video, I don't remember what the number was. It was some obscene number, like 37 times. My guy says, I'm not doing anything until I have my lawyer. Calm, cool as a cucumber. And every time he says it, the officer ratchets up his aggravation level until finally the cop's yelling at him. So you hear this yelling, demanding tone, and my guy is still cool, not moving an inch, and he says to the officer on camera, I don't understand why you're getting so upset. I understand that you have a job to do and you're just doing your job. Why don't you understand that I have a job to do and I'm doing mine? I just want my lawyer.
Brilliant.
We beat that case.
Of course.
Now,
because if a jury sees it, they see that he was the voice of reason.
Again, it's the exception to the rule. You don't want to be a wise ass with cops. But the point being, the recordings, these body cams, these dash cams, they're two-way streets. So, look, I will be honest with you, as I am honest with my clients when we sit down and talk about DUI cases. And I say, if there's a video, the odds are the video is going to make or break your case.
Correct.
So when you come to me, don't expect me to tell you right up front, here's what's going to happen. Number one, I don't have a crystal ball or, a Ouija board or tarot cards or ESP. I don't have any way to divine the end result from the beginning, although I can have a strong feeling or not based on what I read in the police reports and what I discuss with you. But if there is dash cam and body cam, I'll have a much better idea based on the tenor and tone and the actual evidence that has, because that's coming in. Right. That's irrefutably admissible in virtually every case. So you're being recorded. You're being recorded. Law enforcement has every right to record you. There's another topic we can talk about at some point. Surreptitious recordings, right? So Ed and I are having a conversation and he doesn't know that I've got my phone recording that conversation. Felony. Another subject, another day.
But not if cops do it. Cops
there's
can
an
do it.
Exception for law enforcement.
They can
And
do it.
you know where that creeps its ugly head all the time? In lewd and lascivious and child sexual battery cases.
And in the narcotics cases. But I wanted to just briefly want to touch on something else you said. It's one of my pet peeves. There are some lawyers in this town. I'm not going to say who, but I know some of them who, when you go see them, will tell you, don't worry about it. 99% chance you're going to get this or you're going to get that, or we're going to dismiss it. And they tell you 99% because they know, first of all, the Florida bar does not allow us to guarantee you anything. Because like you said, the reality is there's no guarantees. Absolutely none.
There is one guarantee that we can give.
Which is that?
The guarantee that we can give and that I will give and that I do give is that I will use every single ounce and every single drop of the skill, mastery, and experience that I have established over 30 years of criminal defense litigation. I will employ every trick, every tool, every rule, every loophole. I will take advantage of any technicality. I will do anything within the confines of the law to beat your case.
And let me tell you why that's okay. Because the state is going to do the same exact thing. And that's the way the game is played. It's as long as it's ethical and fair, they're going to do the same thing we're going to do. But if a lawyer tells you, oh, there's a really good chance, or even a 99% chance, I'm telling you right now, right here, you tell him, put it in writing. Put it in writing that you're guaranteeing me a certain outcome. And if they do, you come to me and I will give you $100. I'm telling you right now on the air, I'll give you $100 if your lawyer put in writing that he guarantees you some type of an outcome. They're not. I promise you they won't.
I don't disagree with you. I think you're 100%
But they
right.
do it. And then when I was a state attorney, you know how many times I used to hear these guys fighting with their clients in the hallway, forcing them to take a plea. And I hear the guy saying, but you told me X. You said 99% chance. Well, there's always the 1% chance. They knew damn well that it wasn't. So tell them to put it in writing.
Before you hire a lawyer, you should vet your lawyer. Okay? There are a lot of attorneys in this town that operate on false and phony reputations. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
True.
There are a lot of lawyers who were once very good lawyers who now are abysmal. They don't work. They don't put in the effort. They rely on decades old.
You know who they remind me of? Marino's last year, man. That was brutal. That was hard to watch, man. And if you only saw Marino playing his last year, you'd think, what's the hype with this guy? Yeah. But if you saw him in his first couple of years, you'd be like, that's the hype.
Yeah. Well, meantime, we don't need to get into a conversation about the GOAT because, he just re-signed and I think Antonio Brown just re-signed and the Gronk re-signed.
The GOAT.
The Bucks are doing it
the
again
real
this
GOAT.
year.
I hate him.
I know.
Hate him.
Yeah, but listen.
You know why?
Because he's the best.
And he's not on my team. If he was a Dolphin, I'd be like, that guy's the greatest that ever played. Even before they invented football, he was better than that guy.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, these are the realities. And that's what our show is going to do. We're not going to badmouth anybody. We're not going to, ruin anybody or do anything personal. But I think you guys need to know. Look, I'll give you an example. Results page. You go to a lawyer and you see his results page. The Florida bar does not require you to put every single case you've ever had. So these lawyers are only putting the cases that they had a favorable outcome. They're not telling you about the ones where they screwed up and their client went to prison for 20 years. The Florida bar doesn't require that. I personally don't like that. That would be like me scouting some guy to come play on my team, but I'm not allowed to know a baseball player, but I'm not allowed to know how many times he struck out. He's only going to tell me he hit 20 home runs a year. Well, I need to know how many times you struck out, dude.
But you can vet lawyers to
yes.
a certain extent. And, another downside to technology is the ability to manipulate it. So there are a lot of lawyers, especially younger ones who are technologically savvy, and others who hire people who are technologically savvy to create the illusion of greatness, right? I have a website, I have a Facebook, couple of Facebook pages, a personal one, and business pages. I have a Twitter tweety thing that I don't use.
You want to tell you, Mike, the best way for them to vet it is talk to different lawyers. Go see 3 or 4 different lawyers before you hire one.
More importantly than that, I agree with that 1,000%. More important than any of those structured things that I've established are the hundreds of client reviews that have been written, because those reviews are from clients who actually hired me and who are expressing some more eloquently than others, but in their words, their experience, to which, by the way, I don't know about other lawyers, but me, I reply to every single one of them. I read them and I reply to them because they don't always have context. And because I want them to know that I appreciate the fact they do it. In fact, one of the things that I tell my clients before we get started is that one of my goals, my selfish goal, is to earn their positive review at the end of the case. And the operative word there is earn. Because I'm not going to hold a gun to someone's head and force them to sit in front of a computer and type something.
Correct.
Either they're going to do it because they want to do it and they're motivated to do it, or it's not going to get done. So I'm upfront with that. I put that in my contract. I'm hoping to earn it. And here's how we're going to go about doing that. So I agree with exactly with what you just said. The best way to vet lawyers is not only to look at what they have out there and not only to look at what other people have said about them, but to talk to other lawyers. Because the way that the attorney speaks to you, the way that the attorney fields your questions, the way that the attorney listens and responds or doesn't, whether or not the attorney gives you attitude, cuts you off, lets you express yourself, whether or not the attorney is informative, bossy, pushy, empathetic. Different people like different personalities.
Correct.
But you'll only know after you talk to 2, 3, 4 different lawyers on the same issue, which one of those 2, 3, 4 gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling, right? It's kind of like dating.
Right.
And
that's another interesting thing. You've got to be very comfortable with your lawyer, be it civil, be it criminal, which, by the way, we're going to be talking about more stuff than just criminal in future shows. But with anything you do, you could be referred the greatest lawyer. And everybody says this person is the best lawyer for your type of case. He's the number one lawyer in the town. If you don't like that lawyer, you don't get along with that lawyer, it's going to create a rift. It's always going to create a rift. If you don't trust your lawyer, it's going to create a rift. And so even if they may be the best lawyer in town, I'm sure there's somebody else who's just as good, but you guys get along and you have a better feel for each other.
It's nice. It's nice to have a rapport. I mean, the expression, you've heard it a million times, I'm sure, maybe you all haven't, but came on vacation, left on probation.
No, I've never heard that one.
Yeah, right?
Came close to actually experiencing it, but no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, wait, was I? No, yeah, I'm kidding.
You have that same type of thing with your lawyer. You want to come in as a client and leave as a friend.
Yeah.
You want to develop that type of a bond. And so when you talk to your lawyer, here's another little tip. Clients sometimes are embarrassed or uncomfortable or feel like they can withhold certain things and not tell you because it's not relevant to their mind. But it may be very relevant, and the government may find out without them knowing the government's going to find out, especially today, because you know what prosecutors do? Not cops on the roadside, but prosecutors. When they get the case from the police and they review the case, they scour social media. They look at you 6 ways from Sunday. Now, they didn't do that back in the 90s. And they didn't do that in the 2000s.
No.
But they sure as hell do it now.
But since you're on the subject, let me tell you something I did do. Now, this, of course, is when you get to specialized prosecutors. The lower level cases, what we call the pit prosecutors, they just don't have the time. And that's the guys that are sitting in the courtroom every day with the same exact judge. The cases are just sent to the division. They didn't really have any involvement with investigating it. When you're in a special unit like I was in narcotics and I was in economic crimes, I'm involved in the investigative process. So I know what's happening with these cases. And so these guys get arrested and they would be sitting in jail. And on certain clients with certain cases, I would request the jail calls every single day. And you know what I would do, Michael? I would sit there working at my desk and I'd be playing the jail call, like watching TV in the background. And sometimes nothing would happen for 6 days. And on the 7th day, they start feeling a little cocky and bam, they say something stupid because they think nobody's listening. But I was listening to that every single day. I don't have to sit there paying attention. He's talking to his girlfriend. He's talking about how much he misses her. And he's talking about things they do when he gets out, what he's going to do to her. I don't care about any of that. So I'm working until he says, oh, and by the way, so-and-so, the guy, what I'm talking about. I'm not saying his name, blah, blah, blah. Go talk to him. And I'm like, oh, here we go. What's that about?
Witness tampering.
So don't talk.
That's another good little tip, another good little pro tip from us. If you are in custody, even if you're just being held, pending a bond hearing, but much less you're actually in custody being detained, everything you say on the phone is being recorded and is potential evidence.
And anything you say to another inmate,
I was just gonna go there, because the first, it's like the first rule of Fight Club, right? Don't talk about Fight Club. The first rule in jail is don't talk about your case.
Actually, this is why everybody in jail who's a career criminal is completely innocent. Never did it. The prisons upstate are filled with people who didn't do anything.
Well, they're smart enough to know that when they brag about what they did, somebody else is going to try and capitalize on that information.
Correct.
It's called substantial assistance, and that's another thing that we'll talk about when we do a show on narcotics and narcotics prosecution cases and ways to avoid minimum mandatories.
There are some cops and prosecutors who are not going to be happy with this show because we're just exposing the underbelly of the system, but we're not doing anything unethical. And I think it's only fair. Everybody needs to know what the rules of the game are, and then let the game begin. Right?
Well, I had a law school professor, I think it was my torts professor, who used to say, "You buys your ticket, you takes your chances."
That's right.
And so that is the nature of this beast.
And that's what I think we're going to want to do here. We're going to be talking about specific stuff, helping you understand, and really things that almost every person in the community could benefit from. Either yourself might have it, or a friend or family member. We'll be talking about domestic violence. I want to bring in a lawyer friend of mine who used to work for the Division of Children and Family, DCF.
The most dysfunctional agency in the state of Florida.
Listen, she'll be the first one to tell you how frustrated she was when she was a lawyer for that agency. But, talking about what are your rights as a parent, what can you do, how far you can go to punish your kids or not punish your kids. We're going to be talking a lot about these things in the future shows.
I had a trial right before COVID of a child abuse case, a parental discipline case that the state charged as felony child abuse. And DCF wrote up as child abuse, and the state attorney charged, and we wound up going to trial on that case and getting an acquittal. Fascinating stuff. How far can you go? Where is the line drawn? In fact, I have it'll be coming up. I don't know if I'm going to do it this week. Maybe it's in the queue. It's ready to launch. Haber PS, hashtag Haber PA PSA of the day about disciplining your child. Again, that's a hot topic, but like Ed said, our hope is that you guys are going to like the show and you're going to stream in and ask questions. And if it does chime and ring well, then what we're going to do is we're going to probably bring in different lawyers that practice different areas of law: immigration lawyers, family lawyers, corporate lawyers, homeowner associations lawyers, all sorts of different attorneys. So that when you are sending questions in, you'll have advance notice and you'll be able to say, hey, you know what? I do have a corporate question. It'll be kind of like a help me Howard type thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we want to do.
We're happy to give you proactive advice. And as Ed says, share some of the underbelly and expose a little bit and equip you and arm you with information that'll help you to avoid some of these very common pitfalls. But we also want to be able to be interactive and reactive to you as opposed to just proactive. So in other words, we don't want to just be barking at you about here's what you should do and here's what you shouldn't do. We'd like to be able for you to come to us and say, here's my question. What do you think?
Right.
And so again, for anonymity purposes, please PM us or DM us or whatever the proper term is.
The Facebook term, Messenger.
Send
in a messenger on Facebook. We'll get it.
You could send it on Facebook Messenger. You could send it on a private message or a text or an encrypted text if you prefer, using WhatsApp.
Carrier pigeon, whatever makes you happy.
It doesn't really matter. However you get it to us, we won't use your name. And as long as you're tuned in, you'll know who you are. And maybe somebody else will benefit from the advice that either we or our learned guests are able to provide to you. That's the hope, I would think.
And we're going
because in that way, what will we be? We will be truly at your service.
Correct. That's our goal, is to be at your service. So we need you guys to get involved. Tell your friends. Tell everybody that, if you've been watching, say, listen, this is an interesting show. One of your neighbors says, hey, I have a question. I got a call from this, and can I do that? Can I do this? Say, hey, look, there's this show that I've been watching. Why don't you ask them a question on Messenger and they'll address it for you? And we can't get into too many details on this show. That's why you go see a lawyer, and you don't have to come see us. You can go see anybody else, but we might be able to help you understand, the beginning of a roadmap of where to go and what to do. Do you really need a lawyer or not? And those kinds of things, but we need your feedback. So tell them again, what is it? At your service with Haber and Martinez. That's going to be basically, it's like a fan page. So it's, I'm not sure what the difference is on Facebook, but there is a messenger. So you can send us a message there. You can go to Michael's Facebook page, which is
Miami.criminal.lawyer or Michael Adam Haber, either way.
I only have one because try to simplify my life. So it's Edward A. Martinez. Being divorced twice, you tend to want to simplify your life.
I also want to put out there that Haber PA has a YouTube channel, and that's Michael Haber Law. And we have 375 as of today, 375 videos. They're short. None of them are more than maybe 2.5 minutes long max.
They're extremely informative, but thank God they're only 2.5 minutes because you bore me to tears on that thing. You're so serious on that thing. You look like a real lawyer on that thing.
Why so serious? No, I shot a block of them. I did a block on marine related video FAQs. I did, manatee zones and no wake zones and several on boating under the influence laws, Fourth Amendment on the water, boating safety inspections. And we shot them on the boat. So my guy literally set up all of his camera equipment, tripods.
That must have been cool. See,
it was
it was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I've seen the boring ones.
Now, the problem with that one was my sunglasses went over and I lost them. So I'm like squinting the whole time. It was horrible. But the videos were fun. Anyhow, today we have 375. I'm always scripting more. I've got 25 more in the queue right now. So I'm hoping to be up to 400 soon. And that's Michael Haber Law on YouTube. And you can, I'd appreciate your subscription. You're free to log on and take a look at any of those at any point in time, because I cover a wide swath of material, from criminal law to criminal procedure to evidence to seal and expunge, all constitutional issues, all sorts of stuff.
And keep watching this show. I do more than just criminal, because over the years I just started doing some other stuff. And really what it started with is usually with a friend of mine or a former client who really loves the way I handled their criminal case. And they would say to me, Ed, I want you to do my family case. And I would literally tell them, I don't know what I'm doing. And they'd say, I don't care. I want you to do it. So I would do it. And I would start getting better. So I do other things in family, but I'm still going to bring in some of my colleagues in that area of the law, because like we said earlier, it's important for you to get a little bit of feedback from other lawyers and how they would handle situations. So ask us anything. It doesn't have to be criminal. You can ask about family. You can ask about civil, contract law, you name it. If you want to know, ask us. And if we don't know the answer, we're going to find somebody to bring them on the show, which will make it more interesting, because sooner or later, they're going to get bored of just listening to us two. So we'll bring people in and it'll spark things up.
And why? Because Haber and Martinez are at your service.
Exactly. We got 3 minutes left. But I think we're pretty much done for today. What do you think?
I'd say we did a pretty good job.
We'll be here every Monday at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
Please.
Madam makeup agent, please get here on time to take care of Ed.
Can't we just put a filter? Can't you just put a filter?
What is it, a baklava?
No, what's it called? The balaclava.
Balaclava.
Listen, if anybody ever comes at you with a balaclava, I'm telling you, you're about to have one of two things happen to you. You're about to get waterboarded or shot in the back of the head.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
So we'll definitely do an episode on stand your ground. So when they come at you wearing that, you guys will know what you're able to do and what you're not able. In fact, I think what we should do is we should dedicate a show to each amendment that's relevant to what we do. We could do a First Amendment show and talk about, what you're allowed to do and not do, and how restrictions and the new. We could definitely talk about the new law that was just signed by Governor DeSantis here in Florida, the Anti-Riot Act, because that's got some First Amendment.
And what you'll get here when you listen here, as opposed to watching some of the media, including Fox or CNN, or God forbid, listening to some politician, you will get the actual law here, not hyperbole and all kinds of crap that everybody's trying to convince you of because it's their own narrative. Here we'll be objective. And if we have an opinion, we'll tell you, this is my opinion, but this is the law objectively. So
that's because we're at your service.
All right. We're done. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Michael, it's been a blast.
Thank you very much.
It's been a blast.
Spending some time with you. It's always nice.
And I like having you here because then I don't have to think.
How about a cafecito?
Yeah, let's do that. All right, guys. Thank you for watching.
Thank you very